All right, so you have probably noticed that my release schedule a little bit off this week. It's now Saturday morning, and usually I record these early on a weekday um, before work. But I took Monday, Tuesday off last week, and then didn't get caught up. So here we are. Uh, this is the third video in the Rule of Life series. Right? So the first video talked about what a rule of life is, that it is not a prescriptive set of tasks. It certainly isn't a set of commandments. Instead, it's almost like a desired position or a shape that we can conform to, that supports and cultivates the kind of practice that I want to be able to fill my life with, and ultimately have my life in its mortality conform to that shape. So I have three words that sort of present the slogan of my rule of life. And that is to be hydrated, to be lean, and to be sober. And the last video I did was on hydration, which was sort of, as you would expect, the idea of fluid and flow, recognizing the boundary of self, the boundary of no self, the mystery, the cosmos, participation in that mystery. And the truly mundane requirement to drink a gallon of water a day. So each of these statements has a practical, mundane, quotidian device around it. And then that represents this broader idea. So today is the word of the part of the slogan is to be lean. And I don't mean physically lean, although the day-by-day manifestation of this concept is based on food. It's based on not the food that I consume, but when I consume it. So I'm an advocate for intermittent fasting, which is food eaten within a certain window and not within the rest of the day, with enough time outside of that feeding window where the body can really digest everything, can really absorb, process, release all of the food that I've taken in. So for me, intermittent fasting works well at roughly like 8 hours on, 16 hours off. And I get up early. So I get up around 4, and then I first eat at around 10. And then I stop eating at around 6. And it'll change, give or take. But I keep that 16-hour window pretty rigorously. And what I found is just by default, setting that window, I'm hungry, for one thing, which it's easy to not be hungry when I eat, when I'm not following this part of the rule, and I'm just sort of eating. Honestly, 80% of the time that I put food in my mouth, I'm not hungry for it. So the intermittent fasting brings some pleasure to the food because I get hungry. I'm hungry when I first break the fast, and I'm hungry in the evening when I have my dinner, and it feels good. And I do lose weight. I don't have to worry so much about what I'm eating. It's not, although there are some guidelines, like I tend not to eat a lot of processed food, particularly during the summer when our farm share is coming in. And I think, one or two directions within the window are helpful. But the real line is that intermittent fasting. So I'm a real advocate for that. And I think there's a model that fits everybody. One meal a day, or a slightly shorter feeding window or longer feeding window. I really recommend that everyone looks into that. The same way I recommend everybody drink more water than you are now. Everything else about the rule of life is resonant. I'm presenting it because it works for me, and something like it will work for you. But these ideas here, hydrated, lean, and then when we talk about sober, I think are things I would strongly recommend that you try. So that's the food. Then being lean also means being moderate in all other areas. And I know that sounds boring as hell, right? Like just a bland, indifferent life. But the mind, this is one of the primary teachings of the Buddha. The mind follows what is put into it. The mind is very plastic. And if you spend a month not going on social media and instead reading the Dharma, you will be different. Substitute anything, substitute A and B for X and Y in that. If you decide for a month to not do A and do B instead, you will be more like B at the end. If I said I'm not going to read the kind of books I usually read. I'm usually reading nonfiction. So I'm going to not read nonfiction. For the next month, I'm going to pull out all of my old swords and sorcery books. By the end of the month, I'll be dreaming differently. I'll be thinking differently. I'll be talking differently. Part of the lean protocol is to be deliberate in what you consume. This is very difficult. I am a practitioner. I spend time thinking about this, and it's important to me. And yet, every day, I spend more time doing stupid, scrolly things on my phone. And you know why? It's because there is an enormous force lined up against us to make us do that. Social media is terrible, but social media is also quite wonderful. This is social media, and I think this is quite wonderful. There's some wonderful things on Facebook. I've never really used Twitter. But it's impossible to curate it. There's an algorithm. And again, I'm not fundamentally opposed to the idea of a recommendation tool. I think it's great to be able to go to an online bookstore and see a recommendation for 20 books that I would never have thought to look at. That's why bookstores are so great, of course. But a recommendation tool is great. But the algorithm is not there to make my life better with recommendations. It is there to keep me distracted. Then that information is sold to third-party creepy oligarchs whose job it is to sow dissension and to destroy the world. That might sound catastrophe thinking and paranoid, but you know it's true. So part of being lean is to be conscious about curating what comes in. So I have a stack of books, and that's my source. I am always trying to reduce the amount of time I spend in front of a screen. I work in a computer. I mean, we all work with computers, of course, but my job is to sit and be on Zoom meetings and type emails. So it's terrible to be in front of a screen. Here's the kind of thing that you should not do if you are practicing the lean rule of life. And I do this, so I can speak from experience. Don't do this. I'll be sitting at my desk behind me. I can sit there for 10 hours and not move. Like, that's my job, tippy-tappy typing. And I'll be in a meeting, a Zoom meeting, or Microsoft Teams, so I've got that up on the screen, and I'm bored. So I start checking my work email. And then I'm anxious. And so I close that down and I pick up my phone. And you know what I do on my phone? I check my email. That is bonkers. The lean rule of life turns away from that. And I think where I'm at right now is recognizing that during the course of the workday, the best I can hope for is to stay sort of contained. But after dinner, as part of the intermittent fasting, turn everything off. I don't do this. This is my goal. I'm working towards this. Turn everything off for the same period of time that I'm not eating. The exception being I start work early. I start work several hours before, so I can do my work stuff. But no other consumption. And then one day a week, Saturdays or Sundays, nothing. Except messages, right? Text message. So the idea that there's enough, we have too much. Because our society today, our culture today, thrives on our distraction. So meditation is fine, but if the rest of our life is filled with these deliberate distractions, then we're just going to keep spiraling. So the second rule of life is to be lean. This is the one I have the hardest time with. Because whatever it is, I don't know if it really is dopamine, but whatever that hit is of seeing subscribers on my YouTube channel or seeing Facebook posts that I deeply disagree with, it's terrible, right? It's awful. But it makes me feel good. So don't do that, right? Hydrated and lean. Then you can be authentic. Then you can be present because you're not distracted. I say what I mean and not what... sometimes I don't even know that the opinions that I have are my own opinions. I'm like, I don't really have an opinion on that. I think from a first principles point of view, a lot of things are terrible, but I don't need to have an actual opinion on anything. I don't need to know about the machinations of Congress. Do I? I'm not saying to not be engaged. I'm not saying to be disassociated from society, but I do think that there's a mechanism to properly absorb information. And I know I sound like an old guy, right? I sound exactly like the people 50 years ago talked about television, and 100 years before that talked about the dangers of the novel.